All right. So, welcome again, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to be talking about Microsoft Copilot and how we can use this to use a secure environment for really powerful AI tools. So, most importantly, we want to make sure you have the opportunity for a hands-on experience. So if you're able to, I am going to show you the steps to get to Copilot, and I will share some prompts in the chat as well. And I encourage you to follow along as you can. So as a quick note, we are recording today's session. However, typically when that automatically generated link shows up in the chat afterwards, it won't work for you. So we will follow up after the session's complete. And if you're looking for that recording, just let us know. So we're going to explore the unlicensed experience for Copilot Chat, and we are going to be focusing on our demonstrations being in a GCC environment. If you don't know what environment you're in, that's okay. We will talk about a couple key indicators, and it might help understand why some of the things you see might be different than people in different organizations. So all of that being said, my name's Larissa Cunningham. I am a learning strategist with Planet Technologies on our Evolve 365 team. So I have had the amazing privilege of working with a number of organizations as they've rolled out and adopted Copilot successfully. And I know from personal experience how overwhelming adopting this particular type of new tool is, because it's a whole new workflow once you start getting used to it. So my goal is to simplify that process for you and give you some real examples for how this can start benefiting you right away. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention that I have an amazing team here from Planet as well that will be monitoring the chat and helping answer questions as those come up. But if you do have a more urgent request, feel free to use the raise your hand feature and we'll try to pause and address it as quickly as we can. So our agenda today is we're going to cover just that high overview of what Copilot is. And then once we discuss some of those security elements and what to expect with Copilot, we'll get into how to access it, explore those navigational features, and start prompting. So my goal is to give you a variety of use cases that can inspire you to see where it fits into your workflow and can benefit you. So we are going to start out with just a high-level overview of AI and what these tools can do. I really want to talk about safety because I know for most of us, that's a very huge barrier that can concern us when it comes to AI. And with all of the different large language models out there, they are helping us start to do things like summarize those lengthy documents or create different professional content for you. But I want to emphasize how important it is to make sure that the tools you're using are approved with your organization, because just due to the nature of how most of these tools learn and grow and gather additional knowledge, if you use ones that aren't approved, it could potentially expose potential or confidential data that you didn't intend to the public. So the good news is Copilot, when you're using it with your organization's credentials, does have built-in enterprise data protection, which ensures your data integrity and that you can use it for some of those more sensitive topics without worrying that it will leave the boundaries of the security you already have. We'll get a little more into that, but I also want to just highlight two main characteristics of generative AI, because these will come up no matter what tool you're using. So the first one is called hallucinations, and this is when AI does a great job of producing a really convincing response, but it's incorrect or not factual. So this kind of brings me to something I will say many times if you join any future sessions with me. You are a critical part of the process of using AI. You're the expert in your field. You understand the scope and restrictions and the subject matter more than anybody else does. And so it's really important that you double check and validate anything that's being created. And Copilot also does a great job here of giving you opportunities to check this and providing resources. So I do want to just say it's a great, helpful assistant, but it's not a pure source of truth. So you're always going to validate those outputs. And then the other piece here is simply change. I know that we all have experienced the many changes we've seen in our software the past several years, but more than even those, AI is changing so quickly. It's improving, you're getting new features, and truly today's experience is the least advanced you'll ever see. So, because of that, I encourage you all to take a growth mindset when it comes to this and not expect to be perfect at working with it right away, and understand that it does take a little bit of a learning curve to get used to adding this into your workflow. So, of course, if you have any questions on any of those lines, let us know. But let's talk a little bit more about some of that data protection. So, when we talk about data, this is a huge area for many of you, and I want to emphasize that when you're signed in with your organization's credentials, you automatically receive enterprise data protection. And there are a couple of ways we can verify that. So I'll show you that during our demonstrations and make sure that you know where to find those key indicators. So what this means is once you're signed in, your data is going to be encrypted. It's not accessible by anyone else. And really the only area that some people get confused with is there's a temporary history of some of your chats, but this is personal to you. So it's just to make it easier so that you don't lose any of the progress you've made in those conversations. And it's not training the underlying models. It's not ever leaving your secure environment, and it's personal to just you. So everyone receives those benefits when they're signed in with an organization, no matter what the background cloud environment is, even if you don't know what that is. But if you work for a US government agency, whether that's federal, state, or local, or you're a contractor that's supporting government work data that's not handling defense-related data, there's a really high likelihood that you're in a GCC environment, which is what we're focusing on today. So if you do ever have questions, sometimes different functionalities come at different times for these groups, and you can always check in with your IT team to find out what environment you're in. GCC is short for Government Community Cloud, and essentially there are some stricter expectations around how data is processed, and so these areas will ensure that your data never leaves or is stored outside of US borders. It's going to be screened by US personnel, those kinds of things that are already in place for the rest of the security in your environment. So ultimately, what this means for you is simply that features roll out slower to your environment rather than what you might see advertised or just demonstrated in a commercial environment. So this is by design. It's to make sure that all of those new features meet the security expectations once they get to you. All right, so we've looked at a number of slides. I just want to highlight how we're going to get to Copilot. And it is that home area for Microsoft. And I will actually share a link in the chat when we get here, but you'll type in m365.cloud.microsoft, and it should invite you to sign in with your organization's credentials. And then we should see pretty quickly when we get to this chat area that you have a green shield up in the top right corner. This is your indicator that enterprise data protection applies to your conversations. If you're signed in with a personal account, those protections won't be in place the same way. So the reason that I talk about how different this workflow is, I know a lot of people like to emphasize how easily accessible these AI tools are, but most of us are used to a search engine where we're trying to condense a really large thought into 4 or 5 keywords to maximize our search results. AI and these large language models work in contrast to that. So you're actually encouraged to share as much context and information in your conversations as possible, because that's going to improve and tailor the results that are coming through so that it meets more of your unique expectations and needs. So it allows us to do more than just find information. We can start creating things and using Copilot as a collaborator and a brainstorm partner. So the reason that we are focusing on Copilot and why it's a little different than some of the other tools very commonly used out there is because it's not just leveraging the most powerful models that are being used for those other tools. It also leverages GPT-4 and GPT-5. And then when it's creating images, it uses DALL-E 3 for those. And it's consistently getting updated and improved in that development. So Copilot is already trained to give you its sources and cite where it's pulling information from. And this is huge for the ability for you to double check those responses and validate what you're getting. So if it ever doesn't give you those automatically, you can simply ask for them and they'll be provided in a couple of ways. When your organization includes the ability to search from the web as well, you are no longer limited by the development of knowledge your tool was created with. It can search online for real-time information and new updates that are coming through all of the time. So this also gives you a really powerful resource to not unintentionally limit the awareness of what was considered in that response. And then just because it's so important, that data protection being included is relatively unique with Copilot. So that being a huge part of it and not training the AI models is a unique experience, especially when working with our internal data. So just as a quick sneak peek, this is what you should see when we get into our chat, but I will go through all of this with you. And if you ever want any of the resources, please reach out to us. We can share some of these as well. But from there, it's pretty easy. You just enter a prompt, you start that conversation with Copilot, we check our sources, and then we continue the conversation and build on the context we've already provided there. So I think a lot of this makes more sense in real time. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into my environment here. So again, this is a GCC experience. So I'm going to go ahead and put this link here in the chat. It should give you that ability to directly log in with your credentials if you haven't already. And by default, I am going to see my new chat here, and we're going to see a couple of navigational elements here on the left-hand side. But I want to get us kind of started first. So since we see our chat here in the middle, I'll highlight this is our prompt text area. This is where you start those conversations. And when you click into that, you might see a history if you've already started seeing what the options are here. Directly below, you'll see typically some suggested prompts for how Copilot can help you. And if we click see more, we'll see additional suggestions as well. So before we get started, I'll just emphasize my profile icon is down here. If I click on this, it will tell me how I'm signed in and what account is being associated. And then up here in this top right corner is where we see that green shield icon where we can verify we have that enterprise data protection. So we're going to start off just really quick with a simple prompt we can all try. And I'll put that here in the chat. And we're going to send this to Copilot. So I just want a simple idea to see how this starts helping us brainstorm and get creative. So I want it to create a table with 5 mission-aligned team capabilities or superpowers that help our team work more efficiently, while meeting security compliance and record keeping requirements. And I, incorporated a couple other details here, but one of the tips I'll give you later on is sometimes I have Copilot ask me questions so I can ensure I'm giving it the context it needs to generate something unique for me. So if you don't want to include that part and you don't want to answer questions, you can just take that last little bit out. And while it's processing, I'll point out two additional elements. So I saw up here it said get quick answer, I think, or quick response. That's because up here in the top corner, I am currently allowing Copilot to decide how long or deep it's thinking and how much information it's going to reason over. It makes this decision based off of your query, so it can do either a quick response that doesn't need to go over as much, or it can think longer and deeper and go over more information before providing feedback. When we leave it on auto, it decides that for us, but you can manually choose this as well. And so for most of ours today, in the interest of time, I'll probably choose quick response. But with Think Deeper, we'll see the steps it goes through, and then it's going to give me a conversational element down here saying, absolutely, I'd love to help you. And it's asking me some questions here. So it wants to know who my scope and stakeholders are and giving me some information. So this is the number of questions. I won't make you watch all of these get answered, but I'm just going to say make your best judgment, even though I asked it for questions. I just want to see what it comes back with, and we're going to select Get Quick Answer. So instead of aligning it to me more specifically, it's now going to come through and say, okay, here's what I'm going to guess and infer. So it's looking through, it gave me a full table based off of what I asked it to, and it's saying, okay, here's the capability, what it's going to mean, and let's scroll down just a little bit. So we're secure by default in our collaboration, and these are the benefits and different elements in here. So anytime that you want to tell Copilot to create a table, I highly recommend suggesting some of the columns you're expecting to show up. So the more details you give, the better its response is going to be. But this is kind of fun to see what those superpowers would be for our team. And down here at the very end, it's even encouraging to say, okay, I did the first thing you asked. Would you like to do these next steps? I can help with them. So as we scroll all the way to the very bottom, you'll get suggestions in your conversation. And our chat box is now down at the very bottom. Right above there, based on the conversations you're having, it will suggest additional prompts we can say. So if I click on add role specific behaviors, it's not going to send it directly to this conversation, but it'll start that prompt and suggestion for me, and then I can add on, tweak, and revise this prompt as needed. So this is just kind of a quick overview of that. And once we get this feedback, I'll point out a couple additional things. But this is how those conversations can start and how you can build off of what your conversation already looks like. This is all contextual. So those suggestions will be based off of the topics discussed up here. And as we add more information, I don't have to repeat any instructions because it's going to take everything I've already said and the responses it's already given me into consideration with my newest prompt. So as we scroll down, it gives us quite a bit, but that kind of gives you an idea for what to expect when you start conversing. Now, I mentioned earlier that these are going to have a conversation history. So along this left-hand side, we can jump to a new chat if we wanted to. We can search through information. I'll get to the library shortly, but down here you should see chats. Now, these are searchable. So if I know some keywords from the conversation, I can search through those. And my most recent conversations are going to be listed in chronological order on the left-hand side. If you wanted to jump into a conversation and not recreate all the context you've already done, we can get to all of our chats. And again, these are in chronological order, so they're going to show me the conversations I've had today and so forth in that kind of mindset. So if you're looking for a specific one, it's not easy to see, we can simply search this conversation. And you can also rename your conversations if you know you're going to need to get back to them. So for example, the one we just did, if I hover over that conversation and go to the 3-dot menu, we're going to see rename. And I can actually rename it, give it a different title, or for me personally, an easy call out is just to add a symbol in front of it. But I think we're maxed out on our title here. So I usually, if I know I'm going back, I'll just throw in an asterisk or a symbol in there so that I can see it really quickly. And then it's easy to spot in my line of conversations. All right, any questions so far? Okay, perfect. Well, let's keep going then. So we've tested out a sample prompt. Now let's talk about how to make those prompts more effective and beneficial for you. So we are going to give you a complicated term you don't have to remember, but context engineering is really just a fancy way of how to think about prompting and talking to Copilot. So I like to think of Copilot as an overeager intern who doesn't want to pester me with questions, but also doesn't want to return empty-handed. And so it's my responsibility to make sure I'm giving it all of the information required to successfully complete the task I'm looking for. So just like if you're bringing on a new team member, you wouldn't expect them to know all of the history or subtleties of your role and exactly where to look for information. So we want to do the same thing for Copilot. We want to give it that relevant information, be really specific about our expectation on what it returns, and give it any additional context like the format, the tone, who this is going to, all of that information. It's also going to be really important for you to define any boundaries. This can be only look at this document or don't look at these resources. But if there are expectations and constraints, we need to explicitly say that. And the way I kind of like to think about it is if you were to give this note to your colleague down the hall, could they successfully complete the task? Because if they couldn't, AI is not going to be able to do it either. So that's a place to kind of start. And then we'll also add on some additional thoughts to consider when crafting your prompts. So as a side-by-side comparison, what makes an effective prompt? Effective prompts are really specific and detailed. Typically, they're written in full sentences, they include instructions, and it usually indicates the purpose, the tone, any preferred format, and those contextual details. So for this example over here, we have, okay, recap the findings of this article I've copied below, include the top 3 concerns, and provide the answer in 2 to 3 paragraphs using a business tone. In contrast, if we're vague, only use a couple of words and keep all of our prompts pretty short, it's just going to be more vague and less tailored and likely not as valuable to you. So if we just said summarize this news article, it's going to come back with an answer, but it's nowhere near as tailored to what you actually wanted to walk away with. Now, at the end of the day, there's no wrong way to prompt, and it should follow that natural conversational language you usually use with your other colleagues. So feel free to experiment, but just keep that in mind if you're not quite getting the results you're anticipating. So a couple of key elements that are going to benefit your prompt results. Not all required, not always all necessary, but they can help bring efficiency to your conversations. So the first one is this persona idea. This is where we define a role or character that we want Copilot to assume as it approaches the task. So if I'm writing an email as a new employee, it will sound very different than if I'm writing a new email as an executive or as a project manager or as an HR specialist. Those are going to take very different tones, have different details included, and use different kind of language. The next is, what is the actual expectation and task we're asking AI to complete? Are we answering a quick question? Are we pulling a summary? Or are we actually drafting and writing something that will be turned into a more formal document? Now, format is pretty closely tied to task, but if it's not explicitly stated and we're expecting Copilot to assume or infer, there's a solid chance it will not do that correctly. So, what's the desired output? Are we writing that email I just talked about? Or are we actually trying to produce a report? Or are we making a picture? Like, those are all very different formats. And even including a 5 bullet list or a 5 column table, these are all specific to the format. And again, the more details, the better your result. Audience is also really helpful here because not only do we tackle a project differently depending on our role in that space, but we're going to consider who's receiving that information as well. So if you're trying to answer a question and make it understandable by a public audience, it might sound very different than if you're tailoring an answer to highly technical teams that need more details and less general terms. So the tone, the complexity, and even some of the verbiage can change drastically here when we include that audience. And last but not least, what's the tone of what we're creating? And this matters even if it's not a full drafted email. This often is something we forget to include and sometimes only consider as an iteration process or a follow-up prompt. When we include the tone up front, we might not have to send a follow-up prompt. We might be able to take and tweak exactly what Copilot gave us the first time and adjust it. The other thing is that we can start to layer some of these tones into our human complexity. Most of us don't just need a formal tone or a professional tone. We might need a casual but direct tone. You might start layering some of these complicated situations together to mirror what you would actually approach this with as the human creating it. So if we create a prompt with all of those things, it could look something like this. And even from here, I have filled in all of these blanks and included these details and realized, you know what, there's more information I still want to give. But this is a really great starting point. So I am going to put this here in the chat in case anyone wants to save this to help them think through prompts that they're creating. So if we fill this in, it might be act as a brand manager, develop a comprehensive social media strategy plan. We're delivering it as a slideshow presentation. Our audience are young entrepreneurs interested in digital marketing. So I hope you can imagine as we change any single one of these elements, your response back is going to completely change. So a great place to start. Now, again, I don't want to limit anyone on the ideas that we can get here, so I'm going to show some real-world examples, but also want to inspire with some of these suggestions and ideas because it's not limited to what we'll show here today. So I am going to come back over here to my demo environment, and we're going to come up here and start a new chat. Now, this little bubble icon will start a new chat for you at any time. And I do highly recommend that if you're changing topics, you start a new chat. I mentioned earlier that your conversations are contextual. So if you completely switch gears and you don't start a new chat, likely you're going to get a compilation of topics you didn't anticipate. So starting a new chat is a really great best practice to keep your topics organized and focused on exactly what you're looking for. So we're going to start out and take an assumption. I'm going to assume the role of an HR business partner who got a survey back for employee engagement. So this is a little bit longer of a prompt, but I am giving it its role. So you're an HR business partner and you're preparing an executive summary of employee engagement survey comments. So this is that background, my role, and the audience that we're giving this to. Now, the task I'm asking for is to identify the 5 themes, representative quotes, and any of the risk themes not addressed. And then we'll create a short leadership-ready narrative, and I'm giving it some constraints to keep it to 300 words, and we're going to go from there. So just to give you an idea of the information that can help you, and we are going to actually include the data. So we can do that by hitting this plus icon, and you can upload directly from your device that you're on, or you can search through the cloud information you have. Now, I want to emphasize Copilot will not analyze any of this information if you don't explicitly attach it to your prompt. It's not going to reason over that without your explicit permission and request. So I'm going to attach this survey, and just so you can see what it looks like, I do have it open here where it kind of came through as a forms response, and all of the different questions and ratings are here, along with some text feedback as well. So coming back here, let's send this on. And I am going to get a quick answer, although it could take a little bit more time and analyze more thoroughly if we weren't using this for demonstration purposes. All right. So it's starting to come and respond to me. It might take a little bit. And if there's ever a point, I have absolutely done this. I've sometimes sent a prompt and realized, oops, I missed something really critical that's going to change my outcome. If that ever happens and it's still producing a response, you might have noticed that little stop icon that was here in the bottom corner. That allows you to just end that process, and you can continue the conversation, just send your prompt a second time with the adjustments you needed. So we're going to come down here. It does give me this friendly feedback of what it's trying to do. And we notice this little number up here. This is what it looks like when Copilot gives you its references. So I attached a specific document, and so it's saying, hey, this is what I referenced. It was the document you attached, but this is what I used to come up with the information below. So from here, I can click on that and open it in a new tab, or just verify that's the correct one. This can be especially helpful if you're adding multiple documents to a prompt, or if you're mixing it with research as well. So if we come down here, it's saying, okay, here are the top 5 themes that were identified, and giving it to me in this quick, efficient list. So risks that might happen if we don't address those concerns, and some recommended actions as well. Again, you're going to be crucial here. Read through this, make sure it makes sense. And then coming down to the very bottom, it gave me my under 300 words narrative for leadership. So I'm going to read through all of this, and then at the very end, it's saying some suggestions of what we could do next. If I like this and I know I'm going to continue using this conversation, but I don't want to lose this response because it's valuable and I just need to make minor edits, we have 2 options. So down here at the bottom, this is where all of your citations will be. We only had 1 in this instance. So if I click this drop down, it's only going to show me the 1. But if I want to keep this response, I can either copy this, I could paste it into OneNote or a Word document, or for additional flexibility, I can choose this pencil icon to edit in Pages. When I select this, it creates a different kind of document. It's called a Copilot page, and I'll show you where to find them. But this allows me a split screen view to continue my conversation, build on the next items I might need, but this is fully editable. It gives me a title based off of the prompt I provided, so I might want to change this and say employee survey summary. And you'll notice up here at the very top, once it has a chance to save, this is what my page is now titled. Now, this is a really flexible space with a number of different pre-formatted templates and things that you can insert that make it really collaborative. So you'll notice my little icon up here saying I'm in this page. If I share this with other people and they access the page, I'll see everyone who's accessing at the same time and where they're at in the document. So from this point, if I wanted to reorder things, maybe I wanted to just completely delete this portion because it's not beneficial, I can click this little 6-dot icon and just delete sections of this page so that I can clean it up. We can also move different things around. So if I want this portion later, you can start to do things like that. And Control-Z will undo that change if you need to. So just to also show you what you can do on your own rather than just inserting, if we come down here, you'll see this little plus icon, or you can hit that / and it's going to bring up a number of pre-formatted options for you. So you could include a checklist so that when you're collaborating, people know where you're at in a process, a call out to make sure people notice different things. So if we were to do that here, let's go ahead and highlight this portion, or not highlight, let's go ahead and come here. We'll do, whoops. All right, I'm struggling today just because I would when someone's watching me. So when we click this format, we can hit call out, and then you can actually say, please review for whatever you're looking to do. So this calls out this section, people will notice it. And then if we do a few more options down towards the bottom, you can include a task list, a voting table, and this allows you to engage and get feedback without having to send a million emails or Teams messages and posts. So it brings a lot of those features directly into this specific area. And I won't get too far into it because there's a lot we can do, but if there ever comes a point, we can turn this into a Word document so that these become a more polished document we're sharing and using. And if we want to share, that is going to be this share icon up here. So as I continue this conversation, since I'm not done yet, I still need to consider a couple of the other groups that will be impacted by this survey. I'm just going to say, okay, create a one-page manager discussion guide. And again, I'm going into a lot of detail saying, I want the 3 questions managers need to follow up with their teams on, practical steps that they can take each month, and make sure that the language follows these elements. So we'll get a quick answer here. And from this point, I do usually get this conversational element. So this is something that when you copy or put this into a page format, do consider if you want to keep that as part of the documentation. But as we start to build additional resources here, if I scroll all the way to the bottom, I still have that copy icon, but the pencil icon changed to a plus icon. That's because I have a page open here on the right-hand side, and it's offering to add the new information produced to the existing page. So when I click that, it's going to go to the very end of the last data that I have in that page and insert the next section. So this was the end of what we had before, and now we have our new response. So this allows you to start pulling your conversations into actionable resources and things that you can keep and reference back regardless of your conversation history. All right. So once we close this out, we can keep this conversation going. That doesn't require the end, but there's 2 ways that we can pull up those references in the future. So if I hadn't already used that page, this icon did change back to an edit in pages. If I were to click that again, it will create a brand new page, but I also have a drop down here. So I could add to a recent page as well and look for the relevant page I already have. And if I do that, it's going to probably add a second section down here at the bottom of the responses here. So that's one way to pull up those pages you've created, but they also live in the library. So on that left-hand navigation, when you see the library section, if we click on that, your pages are going to be listed here, and you can easily jump back into previous ones. We can start a brand new page, so you can create it from scratch, or search through and actually look for different pages based on the title. And I do want to emphasize this is strictly using the title, so it is best practice to make sure that you have a title you can remember or keywords you can remember there. And last but not least, there is one other way that we can get to those, and that's when we start a new chat. Up here in the top corner, we have our 3-dot menu, and you'll see recent pages here as well. So we can search through here. This is that same view we saw just a moment ago from the chat. Right, so let's go ahead and take on a slightly different persona here. And let's say that we need to analyze some financial data. So in this instance, I'm going to tell it that it's a financial analyst and we're preparing a Q2 financial briefing for executives. Again, who's the persona taking this on? Who's the audience? And what are we specifically trying to do here? Now, I did add in something that I want to encourage you all to consider when working with Copilot. And I said, if there's any required data that's missing, please flag any gaps and explicitly suggest what additional information would be needed and use placeholders. So I'm giving it instructions of what to do if it doesn't know the right answer. So we're going to add in some additional details here. I'm going to search for this report and we're going to send that off. Again, you can add multiple documents, but for simplicity, we're keeping it to one right now. And while it's creating that, I'm going to come over here to this tab. This is what this document looks like. And it's not 500 pages long, but it has quite a bit of information in it. So if we come back here, let's see what it came up with. So again, I want to call out these reference icons, especially when you're pulling outside data. Make sure that you double check those and they're valid resources. But because of that, it's just looking at Q2 and it is basing it off of this entire document. And it's actually pulling through all of the Q2 information historically, and it's pulling the different cost drivers by year. So as I start to go into these, again, make sure you're reviewing and that this all makes sense. And if something's odd, we can simply ask for a quick adjustment or say, no, actually do X, Y, and Z, or no, actually only focus on 2025, whatever that might look like. And then I did give it some specific table expectations here. So I wanted to know what changed, why it changed, potential impact, and the recommended action. You, of course, do not have to keep all of this exactly as it is. But one thing and tip that I'll point out is that because it gives those references, these become part of the data you might copy or turn into your page. So in this case, if I scroll all the way down and I say, I really like this, let's turn it into a page. Benefits are, when it comes to this page area, you'll notice all those reference icons are still links I can use. They'll open that document. So I can still use this, but I'm probably not going to want it to be in any of my official emails or communications. So one of the tips that I would offer is once you're happy with the validation you've done in your prompt response, I'm going to say, great, now rewrite the table without references or without reference links. And that's simply to get me a quick version of this exact same table without having those links that we'll see down here as part of them. So now I might take this and we'll scroll to the bottom, add to this page. And this is something I can actually copy and add to an email or different section of documentation. So we don't want to skip the validation part, but sometimes those links can be tedious to remove. So that's something that I have personally done when I wanted to clean up that information. Now, of course, we can continue this conversation. I'll close this page out and we can use Copilot to kind of help us get different perspectives. So I started out saying it was a financial analyst, which helps take on the original task. But now I want it to take on the persona of a communication specialist who needs to write an internal notice. So even in the same conversation, I can kind of adjust and say, okay, for the next step, we're taking on this mindset. And we can include different things like what to kind of pause or not take into consideration, any constraints and things like that. So because I gave it that communication style, it came through with an internal notice, title and subject, and pulled together a professional information here. So notice that it didn't have all this information, so it's giving me a placeholder and it wants me to include updated revenue projections and elements like that. So it didn't make anything up because I told it what to do when it didn't know. So again, we'll see a number of placeholders throughout, and it does do a good job of calling those out for you. All right. So I know we only have a few minutes left, so I do just want to share a couple of tips and tricks when you're prompting that you can try. One of those you kind of saw in a couple of the examples, but one is to have it ask you questions. I have had so many experiences where I think I've given it everything that it could possibly need to achieve a task, but I add on this question of ask me questions for any data you don't have, or ask me clarifying questions to complete this task. And it comes back with things that I never considered adding into my original prompt. And then it allows that to become part of the context and tailors my result so well in ways I didn't consider including. I do also love using Copilot as a brainstorming partner, but I like to tell it to give me multiple options. So whether that's 2 or 10, have it give you multiple choices. Maybe you're trying to come up with a catchy title so that people pay attention to what you're sending. Most often when I have multiple options, I end up pulling from my ideas and then combining it with 2 or 3 that I got from Copilot, and it becomes a merge of those concepts. Now, show your work isn't implicitly going to actually have it show you exactly how it reasoned over the data, because unfortunately it just doesn't function that way. But what does work is having it walk you through its process, and then that becomes part of the context it's considering. So it almost guarantees that it moves through a certain set of steps or assumptions when it's creating those, and then includes that when it actually gives you the full response. This also helps when you're trying to figure out why it gave you an odd answer or something that didn't align the way you thought it would, and helps figure out what you might tweak in your future prompt. It also does a good job of creating frequently anticipated questions so that you can help put more complicated topics into a question and answer format that might be easier to digest. And then some additional things, if you're just getting started with AI or any large language model, have it help you create a prompt, or say, I want to really analyze this financial data for forecasting. Help me get 5 different really high quality analytic prompts. And then this gives you those multiple options where you can pick and choose what you like and what's beneficial. And it starts to give you an idea of what is helpful to include in those prompts. So it's a great place to start to get those ideas and add in information you might not have considered. Asking clarifying questions is similar to our previous example, but allows you to encourage it to search for more specific data or tell you where it's missing things. And last but not least, one of the biggest things that's helped me is not trying to include everything that I need in my first prompt. Sometimes it is better to take the first step and foundation of your task, work through Copilot, make sure it's the way you like it, and then add on the next portion and build from there. And that gives you the opportunity to ensure that the proper assumptions are being made, that you are adding in all of the information and it's building correctly, rather than doing everything all at once and one of the initial assumptions was incorrect. So it just gives you more control over the creation process as you go. So just some ideas to try to add into the prompting techniques you're already using. Now, I mentioned this at the beginning, but a growth mindset really is the biggest tool that you'll take on for success with AI. It's really not about perfection or even getting things perfect on the first try. It's just about progress. It's about saving time. And ultimately, as you practice these things and start to implement them, you will save more and more time because you'll be more familiar with what to expect from your results. All right. Well, I know we're close to the top of the hour, and I really want to respect all of your time. So I want to save some opportunity here for any questions we didn't get a chance to answer. And feel free to use the raise your hand feature or put those questions in the chat. But I also want to just let you all know that we have, as an organization, helped so many people launch Copilot with confidence. So if that's something that you're a part of within your organization and there's any way that we can help, please feel free to reach out to us. We would love to assist in any way that we can.